This chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo introduced us to one of the most ridiculous curse techniques we have ever seen. While visiting Shin Osaka Station, Usami let the Okotsu siblings know that a man-eating shark had appeared. Their mission was to destroy it. Yuka couldn't help but feel like dealing with a shark was more of a job for the local authorities. Tsurugi agreed and wondered why they needed Jujutsu sorcerers for the job. All the while, Maru was awed by their surroundings. Usami replied that the fish had been seen in the Gifu prefecture. And that was really weird since Gifu is landlocked. Tsurugi wondered if the animal somehow swam up a river. But that wasn't the case. Apparently, this shark was swimming through a forest. Now, this concept and panel seems to be inspired by a meme, an obscure joke about sharks living in the Missouri woods. The trio boarded a train and headed to Gifu. Tsurugi was still annoyed by the cold reception he received from Maru the night before, although in reality that was actually Maru's twin brother, Cross. Speaking aloud, Tsurugi clarified that cursed spirits only show up in Tokyo. Maru was unfamiliar with the term and questioned it. Tsurugi jabbed at the alien, asking if he was allowed to talk to him today, much to Maru's confusion. That said, he was surprised that Maru didn't know about them, despite his people also using Jujutsu. Yuka explained that cursed spirits are the collective manifestations of the cursed energy that leaks out of people in Japan, which is what most creatures from mythology really are. Her brother added that it has been decades since sorcerers have had to deal with cursed spirits outside of the inhuman Makyo, so it was one hell of a coincidence that this was happening right after the arrival of aliens. Maru was confused. Yuka clarified that her brother suspects that the shark is really another alien like the Simurians. Maru was outraged. He swore that none of his people looked like the creature Usami showed them, along with the fact that they don't eat people. And just like that, he indirectly confirmed that he is an alien. Hesitating, Maru could only promise to tell them more when he's allowed to. Yuka was unfazed. She figured that there must be a reason why he and Usami were keeping it a secret. At the very least, she knows that he's not a bad guy. Maru was moved by her faith in him, although that faith wasn't nearly as strong as he would have liked. Now, I wonder if Maru's unfamiliarity with cursed spirits is only in terms of the terminology, because if his home planet never had anything like cursed spirits in the first place, that could say a lot. Maybe the Simurians have information and practices that could help humanity get rid of cursed spirits for good. Although, who knows what something like that could do to Jujutsu society. And if the foundation of Simurian strength didn't come as a result of dealing with curses, that would imply that they are more so inclined towards fighting amongst themselves, which would be another concerning can of worms. Once they arrived, Yuka took to handling the natives, presumably because of her brother's personality and Maru's unfamiliarity. She learned that the shark was already responsible for 2 deaths, and there were 3 witnesses. The witnesses claimed to have seen a shark close to mangled corpses, and this was all despite there being no bodies of water in the immediate area. Yuka decided to double check that this was exactly what they saw. One of the old folks claimed to have seen it himself. The old-timer from our era claimed to have seen it on a dark, moonless night. That didn't exactly fill Yuka with confidence, so she relayed the information with a grain of salt. And thanks to future technology, she was able to relay the information by touching her temple. Tsurugi was listening to her from his bracelet. The bite marks from the victims didn't look like they came from a bear or anything like that. She promised to meet back up with them once she's done talking to the other witness. Maru was listening too and thought about the information. Tsurugi wanted to know if Maru was sure that this sort of thing wasn't secretly happening all over the country. Maru wondered what he meant by that. Tsurugi remembered the criminal's belief that the aliens would soon wage war. So more curtly, he asked Maru if the Simurians were conducting some sort of underwater invasion, although in this case there wasn't much water. Disturbed, Maru reminded himself that his mission is to ensure that such a thing does not happen. Pointing a finger, he asked if Tsurugi really thinks that humans are so advanced in their rationality and morality that they have the right to criticize aliens. Tsurugi barked back, since that was one hell of a thing to say, since the Simurians were the ones who placed themselves in human territory in the first place. Maru gritted his teeth. Apparently, they didn't have much of a choice. Which reminds us of the fact that these guys are refugees, so they must be running from something. Maru wanted to know why Tsurugi was so against him today. Maki's grandson insisted that as a Jujutsu sorcerer, he could die on any given mission, so he wasn't fond of having a deadweight idiot like Maru along for the ride. He definitely got his crassness from his grandmother. Maru shouted back that the jerk sounds just like his brother. He wanted to know what about him was so overwhelmingly stupid. Tsurugi brought up the fact that Maru was the one who took down the kidnapper. Although he doesn't know what curse technique Maru used, if something like that was possible, he questioned why it wasn't done from the very beginning. Maru tried to remind the disgruntled teen that the higher-ups told him not to get involved. Annoyed, Tsurugi asked if he would place those orders above the life of a kid in danger. Maru hesitated. Then they were both interrupted by the presence of a huge shark swimming through the air in the middle of the forest. The duo immediately freaked out. They shouted "shark" in unison. Although Tsurugi was also quick to drop down into his stance and prepare his katana while telling Maru to step back. But the panicking alien told him to hold back. He was afraid that using the cursed tool would result in a wildfire. Tsurugi hadn't thought of that and paused. In that case, he shouted at the freeloader to do something. That really riled Maru up, enough to leap and begin wrestling the finned fiend. Now he was sure that Tsurugi would be able to attack without using any fire. And even as he moved to do exactly that, Tsurugi insisted that he didn't need any help. But this was all interrupted by the face of a middle-aged man on the bottom of the shark as he questioned their presence. As yet again, the duo freaked out. Only this time, they shouted about seeing an old man. Standing upright in what was now clearly just a shark costume, the offended man yelled back that he's only 46. To Tsurugi, that definitely made him old. Although the shark man had never met them before, he figured that they were from Jujutsu High and wondered what they were doing all the way out here. Tsurugi hadn't expected him to be familiar with the school. The man explained that he's actually a graduate, which is how he's able to do his whole shark routine. Tsurugi wasn't very enthused by the sight of what the school had produced. Maru let him know that they're on a mission to deal with a man-eating shark, and the man made it clear that he doesn't eat people. In fact, he hasn't eaten anything besides booze and snacks in a while, which was a different issue altogether. This guy is a former Jujutsu sorcerer named Osada, and it turns out that he's in the forest to deal with a man-eating tiger named Toranosuke. Tsurugi was freaked out by the thought of a wild tiger in Japan, which was yet another animal Maru was unfamiliar with. Osada added that over 50 years ago, illegal foreign traders brought along 2 tigers and made this mountain their home. The man-eating tiger was actually their inbred grandchild, and despite a lack of genetic diversity, Toranosuke had always been a very intelligent beast. Even without sharing a language, Osada and the tiger could understand one another with just a bit of eye contact. In recent times, a nearly defunct solar plant was restored thanks to funding from the Paranormal Treaty. Unfortunately, that, along with the rising heat, caused the river to dry up. The entire ecosystem of the mountain has suffered because of it. This forced Toranosuke to venture down the mountain in search of food and water, which is how he ended up eating people. And in the aftermath, the villagers ended up seeing a shark. In simple terms, Osada explained that his curse technique allows him to summon and use the powers of whatever he wears, no matter the location. He urged the two not to blame the villagers, which was an unnecessary statement since they only blamed him for making things so confusing. Now, for as silly as this guy may be, that is one hell of a curse technique. In theory, he should be able to copy another person's curse technique and abilities like this. So what's stopping him from cosplaying as Gojo and gaining access to Limitless? And as a graduate of Jujutsu High, he should at least be decent in a fight. But in this case, instead of trying to exterminate the tiger, Osada was here to save him. Tsurugi believed that a beast with a taste for humans needed to be put down. Osada understood, but he didn't think it was fair for the animal to suffer due to human circumstances, then die because of them too. Because he doesn't get along with the villagers, Osada's home is really far away from them, so he plans on keeping Toranosuke there with him. As a sorcerer, he figured that he can handle a tiger or two if need be. And man, sorcery is really in the gutter these days if a normal animal is a tall order. Mind you, Yuji was known as the tiger of his old school. But despite Osada's hopes, Tsurugi refused to relent. Osada added that if this was simply a matter of protecting the ecosystem, the tiger's grandparents should have been put down long ago. But because he'd chosen the path of coexistence, he couldn't afford to change his mind now. Maru considered the importance of coexistence since it also applied to his people. As such, he begged his partner to agree on the tiger's behalf too. But Tsurugi was adamant. He questioned what Osada would do if the tiger ends up killing more people. With a wry smile, the man mentioned seppuku. But Tsurugi was unmoved since that wouldn't be much consolation for the victims or their families. Suddenly, Osada told him to stop. Todoronosuke was nearby. The man-shark moved with haste. The reason he went with a shark costume in the first place was because its nose was made for smelling blood. Now he knew where Todoronosuke was. He found himself standing in front of a streak of blood on a tree. The tiger was looming from above. Tigers can definitely climb trees, but it's not exactly a common practice for them. But Todoronosuke has always been smart, and this was a trap. He hacked off one of Osada's fins in an instant. Tsurugi and Maru ran over as fast as they could. Tsurugi slammed into the animal's side, and the angry beast hit an Akira slide. Maru begged Tsurugi to wait a moment, but Osada accepted where things were headed. Tsurugi was ready to cut the beast down. Todoronosuke slowly inched closer as Tsurugi's eyes matched his intensity. Maru was worried about Osada, who they now both call Old Sada. Thinking back to a baby Todoronosuke, Osada recalled a sense of kinship thanks to their similar sense of loneliness. Although he recognized that Todoronosuke's mom was still around, he also knew that one day she would be gone. Confidently, he let the adorable tiger know that being alone isn't so bad. He was sure that it would only make him stronger. While scrunching up the cub's face, he promised that if Todoronosuke is ever in any real trouble, he can visit his home at any time. Many years later, Osada was stunned by what he saw outside of his home. A huge paw print on the ground. Todoronosuke had come back to see him, but he wasn't around. Because of that, Osada thought that there might be some hope. But when he locked eyes with Todoronosuke now, he could see that there was no getting through to him. Sobbing and apologetic, Osada could only beg Tsurugi to handle things quickly and cleanly. Todoronosuke lunged. Tsurugi drew his katana. Things were over after a single slash. Maru was holding himself while looking at the tiger's corpse. Osada apologized to his junior for leaving him with such a terrible task, but Tsurugi reminded him that it's his job. With another wry smile, Osada accepted that the boy truly is a Jujutsu sorcerer, which didn't seem to be a totally kind remark. After all, this guy left the business. From there, Tsurugi approached Maru. Suddenly, the alien said that his job is to gather information so his people can accurately decide if they can coexist with humans or not, along with the fact that his curse technique is actually one he shares with his younger twin brother. So he's not supposed to use it except in the case of emergencies. And while this isn't something we've ever seen from humans, I have to wonder if it's a rarity for the Simurians or not. Technically, half of the Simurians we've seen thus far have been twins, so we don't even know if twins are a rarity or not. For all we know, this is par for the course. Previously, Cross called Maru a warrior. So if they have the same power, does that mean that Cross is one too? Or is this mysterious ability applicable in other ways? Tsurugi was taken aback by the mention of a twin and quickly realized his own error. Cross can tell if Maru uses a lot of cursed energy, so by using their curse technique, he ran the risk of lowering his brother's opinion when it comes to the Earthlings, which is why he hesitated on their previous mission. He apologized after saying that it wasn't because he didn't care about the children's lives. Now, I assume that this detection goes both ways. So with Cross being on a mission of his own, I'd imagine that Maru would be able to tell if his brother was up to something with his power. And if Maru is ever in any real danger, his brother will probably show up. Taking a seat next to him, Tsurugi wondered if it was alright for Maru to tell him this stuff. It definitely wasn't, so he hoped that Tsurugi would keep it a secret. In that case, Tsurugi asked why he decided to tell him in the first place. The answer was simple. Maru wants the two of them to be friends. He couldn't help but see the similarities between the tiger and his people. But at the very least, he and Tsurugi can speak the same language, so he wants to tell Tsurugi as much about himself as he possibly can. Just then, a little head popped out from a bush. It was an adorable tiger cub. Tsurugi shot up with his hand on his sword. Toronosuke had a child. Maru panicked. He begged the guy to wait a moment. Osada rushed over and was shocked by what he saw. Tsurugi lifted the cub by the scruff of its neck and presented it to the old man. He told the former sorcerer not to take his eyes off the animal. Clutching the little guy tightly, Osada swore to keep it close. Maru asked if he was sure it was alright. Tsurugi believed that it didn't matter. In the end, nobody could say how the cub would turn out, and the same went for them. Maru smiled as his eyes shone. He agreed with the sentiment. Meanwhile, Yuka was still being tended to and held up by a bunch of friendly old people. This was a very simple and relatively cozy chapter, which surprised me since this is supposed to be a shorter series of only about 3 volumes. Because the first chapter served to build Maru's relationship with Yuka, it makes sense for her brother to do the same with this one. So far, the tone of this series is very different from its predecessor. Frankly, if this wasn't connected to Jujutsu Kaisen, I wouldn't be interested in the slightest. Personally, I tend to follow a 3-chapter rule. If the first 3 chapters of a series don't grab me, then I don't stick around. In this case, we're coasting on the reputation of the previous story and having faith in Gege's cooking. But I'd argue that some random new series might be a more entertaining read simply because they have no choice but to try and captivate readers immediately. With Modulo taking place 68 years later, pretty much anyone we care about from the past is either dead or super old. But the possibility of seeing them, their romantic pairings, or even their descendants is a bit of silver lining to keep us going. And as much as I appreciate Gege adding more to the world building this time around, I would hate to see that at the expense of all the things that made us love his work in the first place. That said, I don't want to judge this series too harshly since it's only just begun, but for now it is pretty middle of the road. Hopefully this series proves to be more than just JJK with weaker dandadan elements, because I do think that it's meant to reflect Japan's current immigration situation. And it's wonderful when a work of fiction actually has something to say about our world. I'm really curious what you guys think so far, so let's keep the discussion going in the comments. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.